The shots echoed through the silent dawn like thunder over the plains, waking Rebecca Vance from a fitful sleep with a jolt that sent her heart racing. Tucson, Arizona Territory, 1878, a place that had once been her refuge, now felt like a trap closing in around her. She sat bolt upright, listening for any sound from the adjacent room where her sister's children slept. The silence was almost as terrifying as the gunfire. Rebecca flung back the thin blanket and rushed to check on the children. 8-year-old Daniel and 5-year-old Emily were still asleep, their peaceful faces a stark contrast to the chaos outside. These innocent souls had already endured more tragedy than many faced in a lifetime, having lost both parents just 3 months prior, when influenza swept through their small homestead. Her sister, Margaret, had made Rebecca promise on her deathbed to keep her children safe, to give them the life she and her husband no longer could, a promise that had become increasingly difficult to keep. More gunshots cracked the air, closer this time, followed by the sound of shattering glass. Rebecca's hands trembled as she quickly gathered the children's meager belongings. She'd known this day might come. Randall Bishop, the man who had been pursuing her since her arrival in Tucson, had made his intentions clear. He wanted her land and he wanted her. When she'd refused both, his threats had escalated, and now it seemed he'd made good on his promise to force her hand. "Aunt Becky," Daniel's sleepy voice broke through her panic. "What's happening?" "We need to leave, sweetheart." Rebecca kept her voice steady despite the fear gripping her chest. "Wake your sister. We must be very quiet and very quick." Daniel nodded solemnly, his young face too serious for a child. He gently roused Emily while Rebecca continued packing, throwing only the essentials into a worn carpetbag clothes, a few treasured possessions, the small amount of money she'd managed to save, and the deed to her sister's land that Bishop so desperately wanted. The small house shook with the force of someone pounding on the front door. "Miss Vance, I know you're in there. Time's up." Rebecca's blood ran cold at Bishop's voice. She motioned for the children to follow her to the back door, praying that the man hadn't thought to post anyone there. The children, sensing the gravity of the situation, remained silent, their eyes wide with fear. With shaking hands, Rebecca lifted Emily into her arms and took Daniel's hand, slipping out into the pre-dawn darkness. The air was cool, carrying the scent of sage and dust. They crept along the side of the house, freezing at the sound of boots on the wooden porch. "Check around back," Bishop's voice commanded. "She's not getting away this time." Rebecca pulled the children into the shadows behind a water barrel, holding Emily close to muffle her frightened whimpers. When the footsteps moved away, she led them toward the small stable where her horse waited. There wasn't time to hitch the wagon. They would have to ride double. As she helped the children onto the mare's back, Rebecca mentally traced the route they would take. North seemed the safest option away from Bishop's influence and toward the small town of Prescott, where she'd heard there might be work for a seamstress. It was a desperate plan, formed in the space of moments, but it was all she had. With one last look at the place that had briefly been their home, Rebecca urged the horse forward into the growing light. The road stretched before them, dusty and uncertain, but anywhere was better than the danger they left behind. They rode hard for hours, stopping only when necessary to rest the horse and allow the children to stretch their legs. Rebecca constantly scanned their back trail, expecting to see riders on their heels at any moment. By midday, the desert landscape had given way to more varied terrain, with scrubby pines and rocky outcroppings providing occasional shelter from the relentless sun. "Aunt Becky, I'm hungry," Emily said softly as they paused near a small stream. "I know, sweet pea." Rebecca handed her a piece of bread saved from yesterday's meal. "We'll find a proper place to rest soon." Daniel, ever the protective older brother, stood watch while they ate their meager meal. "Are the bad men coming after us?" he asked, his voice small but determined. Rebecca hesitated. She'd never lied to the children, even when the truth was difficult. "They might be, but we're going somewhere safe, I promise. Like Mama promised." The boy's question struck her heart like a physical blow. "I'll do everything in my power to keep that promise, Daniel." She pulled him close, feeling his thin shoulders beneath her hands. "Everything." They continued their journey as the afternoon waned, the horses' pace slowing with fatigue. Rebecca knew they wouldn't make it to Prescott before dark, and the thought of spending the night in the open with two small children and possibly being pursued made her stomach clench with anxiety. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the trail, she spotted a plume of smoke rising above the trees ahead. A homestead, perhaps, or a camp where they might find temporary shelter. Caution warred with necessity as she guided the horse toward it. The smoke led them to a small clearing where a solitary figure tended a campfire. A tall man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. A horse grazed nearby, and Rebecca could make out the shape of a bedroll and saddle bags arranged neatly on the ground. She hesitated at the edge of the clearing, one hand reaching back protectively toward the children. Strangers could be dangerous, especially in these parts, but they needed help. The man looked up, noticing them for the first time. He rose slowly to his feet, his movements deliberate as if trying not to startle them. "Evening, madam," he called, his voice deep and steady. "You folks look like you've had a long day of riding." Rebecca swallowed hard, assessing him quickly. His clothes were worn but clean, his face weathered by sun and wind. A gun hung at his hip, but that was common enough in the territory. What caught her attention most was the gentle way he regarded the children, a hint of something like sadness in his eyes. "Yes, we have," she replied cautiously. "We're traveling north." He nodded, not pressing for details. "Fire's warm and I've got coffee brewing. Not much in the way of food, I'm afraid, just some beans and bacon." "That sounds wonderful," Emily piped up before Rebecca could answer, earning her a small smile from the stranger. "Name's Isaac Lawson," he said, tipping his hat. "Most folks call me Ike. I'm Rebecca Vance. These are my children, Daniel and Emily." The small lie seemed safer than explaining their true circumstances to a stranger. If Isaac noticed her hesitation, he gave no indication. "Pleased to meet you. Come on down and rest a spell. Your horse could use the break." Rebecca helped the children dismount, keeping them close as they approached the fire. Isaac moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to the outdoors, adding more wood to the flames before returning to his cooking. "You're welcome to share my camp for the night," he offered, stirring the pot of beans. "Not safe for a woman and little ones to be out alone after dark." Rebecca stiffened slightly. "We'll be fine, Mr. Lawson. We only stopped to rest briefly." Isaac glanced up, his blue eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. "No offense intended, madam, just offering." There was something in his steady gaze that made Rebecca pause. He didn't seem threatening, despite his imposing size. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Perhaps we will stay just for tonight. Thank you." The children settled eagerly by the fire, their faces brightening as Isaac handed them each a tin plate of beans and bacon. Rebecca watched them carefully, still wary but grateful for the hot meal and moment of respite. "Where you folks headed?" Isaac asked casually, pouring coffee into a tin cup for her. Rebecca accepted the cup with murmured thanks. "Prescott. I'm hoping to find work there. Prescott's a good town." He nodded thoughtfully. "Growing fast, Plenty of opportunities for those willing to work hard. Are you from there, Mr. Lawson, just passing through like yourself?" His eyes flickered briefly to the trail behind them. Running from something or someone. Rebecca tensed, her hand instinctively moving toward the children. "What makes you say that?" Isaac shrugged, his expression remaining neutral. "The way you keep checking the trail. The fact that you're traveling light and fast with young ones in tow. Been around long enough to recognize the signs." For a moment, Rebecca considered denying it, but exhaustion and the weight of her circumstances made the truth spill out. "A man named Randall Bishop. He wants my sister's land, and me. He's not accustomed to being refused." Isaac's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Bishop has a reputation, not a good one. You know of him. Know of most troublemakers in the territory." He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing upward. "Used to ride with the law." Rebecca studied him more carefully. Despite his rough appearance, there was something reassuring about his presence. "And now I ranch a small spread near Brownsville in the northern part of the territory, just returning from business in Tucson." He glanced at the children, who were starting to droop with exhaustion after their meal. "Those two should get some sleep. Tomorrow will be another long day." Rebecca helped the children settle on her bedroll, tucking her shawl around them for extra warmth. They fell asleep almost instantly, the tension and fear of the day catching up with them. When she returned to the fire, Isaac handed her another cup of coffee. "They're not yours, are they?" he asked quietly. Rebecca hesitated before shaking her head. "My sister's. She and her husband died of influenza 3 months ago. I promised to care for them. Noble thing to do, not noble, necessary." Rebecca stared into the flames. "They're all the family I have left." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the crackling fire and soft breathing of the children the only sounds in the night. Rebecca found herself oddly comforted by Isaac's presence, though she'd known him less than an hour. "How far do you reckon we are from Prescott?" she asked eventually. 2 days' ride, maybe more at your pace." Isaac seemed to consider something before speaking again. "Your horse won't make it carrying double the whole way, and if Bishop is pursuing you, you'll need more than luck to stay ahead of him." Rebecca's heart sank. She knew he was right, but had no solution to offer. "We'll manage somehow." "I'm headed north myself," Isaac said carefully. "I could accompany you at least part of the way, safety in numbers, as they say." Rebecca regarded him suspiciously. "Why would you do that? You don't know us." "Let's just say I've seen what men like Bishop can do." Something dark crossed his features before he continued. "Besides, those children deserve a fighting chance." Rebecca wanted to refuse accepting help from a stranger when against everything she'd been taught about survival in the territories. But looking at the sleeping children, she knew her options were limited. "Very well, Mr. Lawson. We accept your offer of escort to Prescott." She straightened her shoulders, adding firmly, "But I want to be clear, we're not charity cases. I can pay you for your trouble once we reach town." Isaac's mouth quirked in what might have been amusement. "Never thought you were, Miss Vance. And keep your money, you'll need it more than I do." As Rebecca settled down to sleep beside the children, she found herself wondering about the man who had so unexpectedly come to their aid. There was more to Isaac Lawson than met the eye depths of story behind his weathered face and quiet demeanor. Whether those depths harbored danger or salvation remained to be seen. Whatever his reasons, his presence offered them protection for now, and in their current situation, that was more than she dared hope for. Morning came with a burst of birdsong and golden light filtering through the pines. Rebecca woke with a start, momentarily disoriented before the events of the previous day came rushing back. She sat up quickly, checking on the children who still slept soundly beside her. The smell of coffee and cooking food drew her attention to the fire, where Isaac stood attending to breakfast. He nodded a greeting as she approached, his expression unreadable in the early light. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to a pan of sizzling salt pork. "Figured the little ones would be hungry." "Thank you." Rebecca smoothed her rumpled skirt, acutely aware of her disheveled appearance. "You didn't have to do that. No trouble." He handed her a cup of coffee, strong and black. "We should get moving soon. Cover some ground before the day gets too hot." Rebecca sipped the coffee gratefully, feeling the warmth spread through her tired body. "How do you propose we travel?" "As you said, my horse can't carry us all. The children can ride with me for stretches. We'll alternate." Isaac glanced toward the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "If we push hard, we might make it to Barton's Creek by nightfall. There's a trading post there where we can rest safely." The practicality of his plan was reassuring. Rebecca nodded agreement as the children began to stir, drawn by the tempting smells of breakfast. They ate quickly, the children surprisingly at ease with Isaac despite having just met him. Daniel peppered him with questions about his horse and the gun at his hip, while Emily solemnly offered him a small wildflower she'd found near their bedroll. Isaac accepted it with a gravity that matched the child's, tucking it carefully into his shirt pocket. The tenderness of the gesture caught Rebecca by surprise, revealing a gentleness she hadn't expected from the rugged cowboy. Within an hour, they had packed up camp and were ready to depart. As Isaac had suggested, Emily rode with him while Daniel joined Rebecca. The girl seemed entirely comfortable perched in front of the tall cowboy, chattering away about the birds and animals she spotted along the trail. They made good progress through the morning, the landscape gradually changing as they moved northward. The sparse vegetation of the desert gave way to more abundant growth, with juniper and pine becoming more common as they gained elevation. By midday, they paused beside a small creek to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of jerky and hardtack that Isaac produced from his saddlebags. The children took the opportunity to splash in the shallow water, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension of the previous day. "They're resilient," Isaac observed, watching them play. "Children often are. Too resilient," Rebecca sighed. "They've had to be. First losing their parents and now this." She glanced at him, curious. "You have children of your own, Mr. Lawson." A shadow passed over his features. "No, madam, never had the pleasure." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but Rebecca didn't press. They had their own secrets to keep. He was entitled to his. As they prepared to continue their journey, Isaac suggested switching the children. "Daniel can ride with me for a spell. Give your horse a bit of relief." The boy's eyes lit up at the prospect, but he looked to Rebecca for permission. She nodded, helping him mount in front of Isaac. "Hold tight to the saddle horn," Isaac instructed. "And if you've a mind to, you can help me keep watch for anything unusual." Daniel straightened importantly, clearly taking the assignment to heart. Rebecca couldn't help but smile at the boy's earnest expression as they set off again, Emily now riding with her. They rode steadily through the afternoon, making better time than Rebecca had dared hope. Isaac set a pace that was brisk but not punishing, occasionally pointing out landmarks or sharing bits of knowledge about the territory. His quiet competence was reassuring, making Rebecca feel less vulnerable than she had since fleeing Tucson. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they crested a small rise to see a cluster of buildings nestled in the valley below. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and a creek glinted silver in the late afternoon light. "Barton's Creek," Isaac announced. "Not much to look at, but there's a trading post and a few cabins, safe enough for a night's rest." Rebecca felt a surge of relief. After 2 nights of uncertainty, The prospect of solid walls and a proper bed was deeply appealing. The trading post turned out to be a sturdy log building with a wide porch running its length. Several horses were hitched to the rail out front, and the glow of lanterns spilled from the windows as they approached. Isaac dismounted first, helping Daniel down before assisting Rebecca and Emily. "Wait here a moment," he said quietly. "Let me make sure all's well before we go in." Rebecca watched as he entered the building, one hand resting protectively on each child's shoulder. They were vulnerable here, exposed in the open, but something told her to trust Isaac's judgment. He returned a few minutes later, his expression relaxed. "It's all clear. Old Tom Barton runs the place. He's a good sort, has a room in the back we can use for the night. Not fancy, but it's clean and has a lock on the door." "That sounds wonderful," Rebecca admitted. "How much does he charge?" "It's taken care of," Isaac said simply, forestalling her protest with a raised hand. "You can settle with me when we reach Prescott if you insist." Rebecca wanted to argue but could see the futility of it. Besides, the children were tired and hungry, their earlier energy fading rapidly as evening approached. The interior of the trading post was warm and smelled of tobacco, coffee, and the various goods that lined the shelves along the walls. A pot-bellied stove occupied one corner, around which several men sat playing cards. They looked up briefly as the newcomers entered, then returned to their game. Tom Barton, the proprietor, was a thin man with a shock of white hair and a surprisingly jovial demeanor. He greeted Isaac like an old friend, then turned his attention to Rebecca and the children. "Welcome to Barton's Creek, madam," he said, his weathered face crinkling in a smile. "Any friend of Ike's is a friend of mine. You and the young uns must be hungry after your travels." "We are indeed," Rebecca admitted, "and grateful for your hospitality." "Molly's just putting supper on," Tom said, gesturing toward a doorway at the rear of the store. "Nothing fancy, mind you, but hearty enough. The room's through there as well. My wife's made it up fresh for you." Rebecca thanked him, following Isaac through to a small dining area where a plump woman with kind eyes was laying out bowls of stew and plates of cornbread. The children's faces lit up at the sight of the hot food, and Rebecca felt her own stomach rumble in response. They ate hungrily, the simple meal tasting better than anything Rebecca could remember. The children's eyelids grew heavy as they finished, the long day of travel taking its toll. "I'll show you to your room," Molly offered, wiping her hands on her apron. "The little ones look about ready to drop." The room was small but clean, with a double bed that would accommodate Rebecca and the children comfortably. A washstand stood in one corner, filled with fresh water that steamed slightly in the cool evening air. "Where will Mr. Lawson sleep?" Emily asked sleepily as Rebecca helped her wash her face and hands. "He'll be fine," Rebecca assured her. "Cowboys are used to sleeping rough." In truth, she wasn't sure of Isaac's arrangements, but she trusted he would manage. After getting the children settled in bed, she returned briefly to the dining area, where Isaac sat talking quietly with Tom Barton. "The children are asleep," she informed him. "I wanted to thank you again for your help today." Isaac nodded, his expression softening slightly. "No need for thanks, Miss Vance. You should get some rest yourself. Tomorrow will be another long day." "Will you be comfortable out here?" "I've got a bedroll in the storeroom," Tom interjected. "Not the Ritz Hotel, but Ike's never been one for fancy accommodations." Rebecca bid them good night, returning to the room where she sat for a long time on the edge of the bed, listening to the children's steady breathing. For the first time since fleeing Tucson, she allowed herself to truly consider their situation. They were fugitives, in a sense, running from a man with power and influence in the territory. The money she had saved would sustain them for a short while, but establishing a new life in Prescott would be challenging. And now they had accepted help from a man they barely knew, placing their trust and safety in his hands. Yet despite these uncertainties, Rebecca felt a curious sense of calm. Isaac Lawson, for all his mystery, had shown nothing but kindness and consideration. His presence had transformed their desperate flight into something almost manageable. As she finally lay down beside the children, Rebecca found herself wondering what awaited them in Prescott, and what would become of their unlikely partnership with the quiet cowboy once they reached their destination. Dawn arrived with a gentle rain pattering against the window, the first precipitation they'd seen since leaving Tucson. Rebecca woke to find the children still sleeping soundly, their faces peaceful in the dim light. She dressed quietly, taking advantage of the moment of solitude to gather her thoughts for the day ahead. When she emerged from the room, she found Isaac already up, sitting at the table with a cup of coffee and what appeared to be a map spread before him. He looked up at her approach, nodding a greeting. "Morning. Sleep well. Better than I expected," Rebecca admitted, accepting the coffee Molly offered as she bustled in from the kitchen. "Thank you, Mrs. Barton. Just Molly, dear, and it's no trouble." The woman smiled warmly. "Breakfast will be ready shortly. Flapjacks and bacon, best way to start a journey day." Isaac returned his attention to the map. "I've been studying our route. The rain might slow us down a bit, but if it lets up, we should still make good time." Rebecca leaned over to look at the map, conscious of his proximity. "How much farther to Prescott?" "About a day and a half at our pace." His finger traced a line across the paper. "There's a small settlement here where we could stop tonight or push on if the weather improves." The children appeared then, still drowsy but drawn by the smell of cooking food. Emily immediately climbed onto the bench beside Isaac, peering curiously at the map. "Is that where we're going?" she asked, pointing to a spot marked on the paper. "That's right," Isaac confirmed. "Prescott. It's a fine town with real streets and buildings, not just tents like some places." Daniel hung back slightly, watching the interaction with a thoughtful expression that seemed too mature for his years. Rebecca beckoned him over, helping him onto the bench beside her. "Did you sleep well?" she asked softly. He nodded, his eyes still on Isaac and Emily. "Is Mr. Lawson going to stay with us in Prescott?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. "I don't think so, sweetheart. Mr. Lawson has his own home to return to." Daniel's face fell slightly. "Oh, I thought maybe." He trailed off as Molly arrived with plates piled high with flapjacks, effectively ending the conversation. But Rebecca found herself troubled by the boy's question, and the disappointment it revealed. The children had grown attached to Isaac, with alarming speed, understandable given their recent losses, and the security he represented, but potentially painful when they inevitably parted ways. Breakfast passed pleasantly, with Molly fussing over the children and Tom regaling them with tales of the early days of Barton's Creek. By the time they finished eating, the rain had tapered off to a light drizzle. "We should get moving," Isaac suggested. "Make the most of the cooler weather." They thanked the Bartons for their hospitality, with Rebecca insisting on paying something despite Tom's protests. Outside, the world smelled of wet earth and pine, the dust of the trail temporarily settled by the rain. As they mounted up Emily with Isaac again, Daniel with Rebecca, Tom came to the porch to see them off. "Safe travels," he called. "And Ike, think on what I said. That offer stands." Isaac nodded acknowledgement but offered no explanation as they rode away. Rebecca's curiosity was piqued, but she refrained from asking about the cryptic exchange. The trail was indeed muddier after the rain, forcing them to travel more slowly than the day before. The children seemed content, however, pointing out raindrops glistening on leaves and the occasional rainbow spanning the valley. "Mr. Lawson," Emily said after they'd been riding for about an hour. "Do you know any songs?" The question seemed to catch him by surprise. "Songs? Mama used to sing to us on long journeys," Daniel explained from behind Rebecca. "To pass the time." A brief silence followed, and Rebecca was about to intervene when Isaac cleared his throat. "Well, I'm no songbird, but I might remember a tune or two." To Rebecca's astonishment, he began to sing in a rich baritone, a ballad about a cowboy and his faithful horse. The children listened raptly, and even Rebecca found herself charmed by the unexpected performance. When he finished, Emily applauded enthusiastically. "Another one." Isaac chuckled, the sound warming something in Rebecca's chest. "Your turn now. What songs do you know?" This sparked an impromptu concert as they rode, with everyone contributing. Even Daniel, usually so reserved, offered a verse of "O Susanna" that his father had taught him. Rebecca sang a lullaby that brought a suspicious moisture to Isaac's eyes, though he quickly blinked it away. The music made the miles pass more quickly, creating a bubble of companionship that seemed to exist outside their uncertain circumstances. For those hours on the trail, they might have been any family on a journey, united by shared songs and the rhythm of hoofbeats on the damp earth. By midday, the clouds had cleared, revealing a sky of brilliant blue. They stopped to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of bread and cheese purchased from the Bartons. "The weather's holding better than I expected," Isaac observed as they prepared to continue. "We might make it farther than I thought today." "Is that good?" Rebecca asked, helping Emily back onto his horse. "Very. The sooner we reach Prescott, the better." He glanced at her, his expression serious. "Bishop's not the type to give up easily, especially if he believes you have something he wants." The reminder of their pursuit cast a shadow over Rebecca's mood. She'd almost allowed herself to forget the danger during their musical morning. "You think he's still following us?" Isaac considered the question carefully. "Hard to say. Depends on how badly he wants that land. And you?" Rebecca shuddered slightly. "Badly enough to shoot at us. Then we keep moving and stay alert." Isaac's gaze softened as he looked at the children. "They're worth protecting." "Yes," Rebecca agreed quietly, "they are." They rode steadily through the afternoon, the terrain becoming more rugged as they continued north. Ponderosa pines towered over the trail, their scent heavy in the warming air. Occasionally, they passed other travelers, a freight wagon headed south, a pair of prospectors leading laden mules, a solitary rider who nodded curtly as he passed. Isaac acknowledged each with the same reserved politeness, but Rebecca noticed how his posture changed subtly with each encounter, becoming more watchful until the strangers were well behind them. "You're very cautious," she observed during one such meeting. "Habit," he replied simply. "Most folks out here are just going about their business, but it only takes one with bad intentions to cause trouble." His vigilance was both reassuring and concerning. Rebecca wondered again about his past and what had made him so attuned to potential danger. As the afternoon waned, they came to a place where the trails split, one fork continuing north while another branched northwest. "Decision time," Isaac announced, drawing his horse to a halt. "North Fork takes us to that settlement I mentioned, Miller's Crossing. We could stop there for the night. Northwest Fork is more direct to Prescott, but there's no proper town between here and there." Rebecca considered the options, glancing at the children who were showing signs of fatigue despite their resilience. "What would you recommend?" "Depends on what you value more, comfort or speed." Isaac's expression was neutral, offering no hint of his own preference. Rebecca thought of Bishop and the threat he represented. "Speed," she decided firmly. "The sooner we reach Prescott, the sooner we can truly start over." Isaac nodded, something like approval flickering in his eyes. "Northwest it is." There's a spot about 2 hours ahead where we can camp for the night. Not as comfortable as a proper bed, but it's sheltered and has a good spring nearby. They took the northwest fork, the trail narrowing as it wound through denser forest. The children had grown quiet, the excitement of the morning giving way to the weariness of a long day's travel. Even Emily's chatter had subsided to occasional whispered observations to Isaac, who responded with patient attention. Rebecca found herself watching them together, struck by the natural ease that had developed between the cowboy and the little girl. There was something both heartwarming and heartbreaking about it, a glimpse of what might have been under different circumstances. The campsite Isaac had mentioned turned out to be a small clearing nestled against a rocky outcropping, with a clear spring bubbling nearby. The remains of an old fire ring suggested it was a regular stopping place for travelers. "We'll be comfortable enough here," Isaac said as he helped Rebecca dismount. "And we're making good time. Should reach Prescott by tomorrow afternoon if all goes well." The thought brought mixed emotions. Prescott represented safety and a new beginning, but it also meant parting ways with the man who had become, in just 2 days, an essential part of their small group. They made camp efficiently, with Isaac tending to the horses while Rebecca organized their few possessions, and the children collected kindling for the fire. By the time darkness fell, they had a cheerful blaze going and a pot of beans simmering over the flames. After they'd eaten, Isaac produced a small wooden whistle from his pocket. "Thought you might like this, Daniel," he said, offering it to the boy. "Carved it while I was at Barton's this morning." Daniel accepted the gift with wide eyes. "For me? Really, really." Isaac demonstrated how to use it. "Not too loud now, don't want to scare the wildlife." The boy blew tentatively, producing a clear, sweet note that made Emily clap with delight. "My turn next. I made something for you too, Miss Emily." Isaac reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small doll fashioned from a handkerchief, with features carefully drawn in pencil and yarn for hair. "Not as fine as store-bought, but she'll do for keeping secrets." Emily clutched the doll to her chest, her face radiant. "I love her." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson." Rebecca watched the exchange with a lump in her throat. These simple gifts, created with obvious care and thoughtfulness, revealed more about Isaac Lawson than anything he had said directly. "That was very kind," she said softly when the children had moved away to explore the immediate vicinity of the camp, still within sight but out of earshot. Isaac shrugged, seemingly embarrassed by her gratitude. "Just whittling to pass the time. Figured they could use something to call their own." "It's more than that." Rebecca hesitated, then continued carefully. "You have a natural way with them. They've taken to you so quickly." A shadow crossed his features. "Children deserve kindness. They've had precious little of it lately." "True enough." Rebecca stoked the fire, watching the sparks rise into the darkening sky. "May I ask you something, Mr. Lawson?" "Ike," he corrected. "And yes, you may. Why are you helping us, really?" She met his gaze directly. "You could have wished us well and gone on your way at that first campsite. Instead, you've delayed your own journey, shared your supplies, and put yourself potentially in harm's way for 3 strangers." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful as he looked toward where the children played. "I had a wife once," he finally said, his voice low. "And a daughter." Rebecca waited, sensing there was more to come. "Fever took them both 5 years ago. Charlotte was just about Emily's age." His hands worked methodically, feeding small sticks into the fire. "After that, I drifted. Took work where I could find it, ranching mostly, some scouting for the army. Tried not to stay in one place too long." "I'm so sorry," Rebecca said softly. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. "When I saw you at that campsite, a woman alone with 2 children, Clearly running from something, it reminded me that there are still folks who need help in this world. And maybe helping you is a way of, I don't know, making sense of things that never will make sense. The honesty of his answer touched Rebecca deeply. She reached out impulsively, placing her hand on his arm. "Thank you for telling me." Isaac looked at her hand, then up to her face. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of shared loss and the unexpected connection that had grown from it. The moment was broken by Emily's return to the fire, her new doll clutched firmly in one hand. "Aunt Becky, can Mr. Ike tell us a story before bed?" Rebecca withdrew her hand, suddenly conscious of the impropriety of the gesture. "If Mr. Lawson doesn't mind." "I don't mind," Isaac said, his voice rougher than usual. "Come sit by the fire, both of you, and I'll tell you about the time I helped drive a herd of cattle all the way from Texas to Kansas." The children settled eagerly to listen, with Emily leaning comfortably against Isaac's side as if she'd known him all her life. Rebecca watched them, a strange mixture of emotions swirling within her: gratitude for his kindness, sadness for his loss, and something else she wasn't quite ready to name. As the stars emerged above them and the fire burned low, Rebecca found herself wondering what would happen when they reached Prescott. How would they say goodbye to the man who had become, in such a short time, so important to them all? The thought kept her awake long after the children and Isaac had fallen asleep, her mind turning over possibilities that seemed both tantalizing and impossible. Morning brought clear skies and the promise of an easy final leg to Prescott. Rebecca woke to find Isaac already up, tending to the horses while a pot of coffee brewed on the rekindled fire. "Sleep well?" he asked as she joined him. "Well enough." Rebecca pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, acutely aware of how disheveled she must look after days on the trail. The children, still sleeping. Isaac handed her a cup of coffee. "Let them rest a bit longer. We've got an easy ride ahead of us today." They stood in companionable silence, sipping their coffee and watching the sunlight filter through the trees. There was something intimate about the moment, just the two of them in the quiet dawn, before the demands of the day began. "What will you do when we reach Prescott?" Isaac asked finally, his voice casual though the question itself was not. Rebecca considered her answer carefully. "Find work, I suppose. I'm a decent seamstress. Rent rooms somewhere respectable until I can save enough for something more permanent. And the land in Tucson, Bishop wants it for a reason. It's not much, 20 acres with a small cabin. My sister and her husband were barely scratching a living from it." Rebecca sighed. "But there's water on the property. A spring that runs even in the dry season. That makes it valuable." Isaac nodded thoughtfully. "Water rights are worth fighting for in this territory." "Not worth dying for," Rebecca countered firmly. "I'd rather walk away and keep the children safe than hold onto land that only brings danger." A wise choice. Isaac hesitated, then added, "But it's your inheritance, the children's inheritance. Might be worth considering other options." "What other options?" "Bishop has money and influence. I'm a woman alone with 2 children to provide for." Rebecca's frustration was evident in her voice. "The law wouldn't help me against someone like him." "Not all battles are fought in courtrooms," Isaac said quietly. Before Rebecca could ask what he meant, Emily emerged from her bedroll, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The moment for private conversation had passed. Breakfast was a hurried affair of hardtack and dried fruit. The children were excited at the prospect of reaching Prescott, peppering Isaac with questions about the town and what they might find there. "Is it big?" Daniel wanted to know. "Bigger than Tucson." "About the same size, I reckon," Isaac replied, "but different, more established. It's the territorial capital, so there are government buildings, a proper school, churches." "A school," Emily's eyes widened. Will we go to school, Aunt Becky? Rebecca smiled at her enthusiasm. Yes, once we're settled. Education is important. They packed up camp efficiently and were on the trail within an hour, the morning sun warming their backs as they rode. Isaac seemed more relaxed than he had been the previous days, though he still scanned their surroundings regularly. No sign of pursuit, he said when he caught Rebecca watching him. I think we've put enough distance between us and Tucson. The reassurance should have brought comfort, but Rebecca found herself strangely melancholy. The journey was nearing its end, and with it, their time with Isaac. The trail widened as they traveled, eventually joining a proper road that showed signs of regular use. They began to pass other travelers more frequently, wagons loaded with supplies, riders on various errands, even a stagecoach that thundered past in a cloud of dust. Getting close now, Isaac announced as they crested a hill shortly after midday. There it is, Prescott. The town spread before them in the valley, a collection of wooden buildings and a few brick structures clustered around a central plaza. The territorial capitol building was clearly visible, its flagpole standing tall against the blue sky. Rebecca felt a surge of emotion at the sight. This would be their new home, the place where they would rebuild their lives. It represented both an ending and a beginning. It's pretty, Emily observed from her perch in front of Isaac. That it is, he agreed, and full of good folks for the most part. They descended toward the town, joining the steady flow of traffic on the main road. Rebecca grew increasingly conscious of their appearance, travel-worn and dusty, their clothes rumpled from days on the trail, not the impression she had hoped to make in their new home. Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort. There's a respectable boarding house on Montezuma Street run by a widow named Mrs. Palmer. She might have rooms available, and she's known to be kind to those in difficult circumstances. How do you know all this? Rebecca asked, curious about his familiarity with the town. I told you I get around. His expression was unreadable as they rode into the outskirts of Prescott. Trade takes me to most towns in the territory sooner or later. The streets were busy with afternoon activity, shopkeepers attending to customers, wagons delivering goods, children playing in the spaces between buildings. Rebecca felt overwhelmed after days in the relative solitude of the trail. Isaac led them confidently through the town to a 2-story wooden building with a small sign identifying it as Palmer House Boarders Welcome. A tidy garden bordered the walkway to the front door, and clean curtains hung in the windows. Wait here, Isaac said as he dismounted. Let me speak with Mrs. Palmer first. Rebecca watched through the window as he entered the house, his hat in his hands. She couldn't hear the conversation, but she could see a gray-haired woman listening attentively, her expression softening as Isaac spoke. After several minutes, he emerged and beckoned them forward. Mrs. Palmer has 2 adjoining rooms available on the 2nd floor. She's willing to let them to you at a reasonable rate and says the children are most welcome. Relief flooded through Rebecca. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. Let's get you settled then. He helped her dismount, then lifted each child down. Mrs. Palmer has offered to heat water for baths and says supper will be served at 6. The boarding house was clean and modestly furnished, with a parlor for guests and a dining room where meals were served. Mrs. Palmer herself was a no-nonsense woman with kind eyes who immediately took charge of showing them to their rooms. You poor dears must be exhausted, she clucked as she led them upstairs. 2 rooms, connected by a door perfect for a family. The larger one has a double bed for you, madam, and the smaller has a trundle that will accommodate both children nicely. The rooms were simple but comfortable, with clean linens on the beds and washing facilities in each. A window in the larger room overlooked the street, while the children's room faced a small garden at the rear of the house. "This is lovely," Rebecca said sincerely. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." "Any friend of Mr. Lawson's is welcome here," Mrs. Palmer replied. "He's done me many good turns over the years. I'll send up hot water shortly." When she had gone, Rebecca turned to Isaac, who stood awkwardly in the doorway of the larger room. "You seem to have friends everywhere we go," he shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the observation. "Mrs. Palmer's husband was killed in an Apache raid years back. I helped her get compensation from the government what was rightfully hers. She hasn't forgotten. I'm beginning to think there's quite a lot more to your story than you've shared, Mr. Lawson." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Perhaps, but right now you should focus on getting settled. I'll see to the horses and bring up your belongings." While Isaac attended to these tasks, Rebecca helped the children explore their new accommodations. Emily was delighted with the trundle bed, while Daniel gravitated toward the window, watching the activity in the garden below. "Will Mr. Ike stay here too?" Emily asked as she tested the mattress by bouncing gently on it. Rebecca hesitated, unsure how to explain their situation. "I don't think so, sweetheart. Mr. Lawson has his own business to attend to." "But he could visit us, couldn't he?" Daniel turned from the window, his expression serious. "We could show him things we find in Prescott." "Perhaps," Rebecca said noncommittally. "We'll see." Isaac returned with their meager possessions, setting the carpetbag on the bed in Rebecca's room. "That should be everything. Mrs. Palmer is sending up water for baths now. Thank you." Rebecca faced him, suddenly at a loss for words. This was at the moment of parting she had been dreading. "We can't thank you enough for all you've done." Isaac shifted uncomfortably, his hat in his hands. "No need for thanks. I was headed this direction anyway." The children had gathered in the doorway, sensing the change in atmosphere. Emily stepped forward, her doll clutched in one hand. "Are you leaving, Mr. Ike?" she asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. Isaac knelt to her level, his expression gentle. "I have some business to attend to in town, Miss Emily, but I'll come by tomorrow to see how you're settling in if your aunt doesn't mind." Relief washed over the child's face. "Promise, promise." He tapped her nose lightly, earning a giggle. "You be good for your aunt now." Daniel approached next, standing straight as if trying to appear older than his years. "Thank you for helping us, sir." Isaac solemnly shook the boy's hand. "It was my honor, Daniel. You take good care of your sister and your aunt." When he rose to his full height, Rebecca found herself staring into his eyes, seeing the same reluctance to part that she felt herself. "Until tomorrow, then," she said softly. "Until tomorrow." He placed his hat on his head, nodded once and was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Rebecca moved to the window, watching as he emerged from the boarding house and untied his horse. For a moment, he glanced up at her window, raising a hand in farewell before mounting and riding away. Only then did Rebecca realize how deeply he had come to matter to them all in such a short time. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. A knock at the door announced the arrival of bath water, pulling Rebecca back to the immediate tasks at hand. There would be time later to consider what Isaac Lawson meant to them and what they might mean to him. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the curtains of their rooms at Palmer House. Rebecca woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks. The comfort of a proper bed and the security of solid walls around them working wonders for her peace of mind. The children were already awake in the adjoining room, their voices hushed but excited as they discussed their plans for exploring Prescott. Rebecca smiled at their enthusiasm, grateful for their resilience after everything they had endured. Breakfast at the boarding house was served in the dining room downstairs, a hearty meal of flapjacks, bacon, and eggs that had the children wide-eyed with appreciation. Mrs. Palmer bustled about, making sure everyone was well fed, pausing occasionally to chat with her guests. "I understand from Mr. Lawson that you're looking for work as a seamstress," she said as she refilled Rebecca's coffee cup. "As it happens, Mrs. Henderson at the Mercantile was just saying yesterday that she's overwhelmed with alteration orders. Might be worth your while to speak with her." Rebecca thanked her for the information, heartened by this potential opportunity. "Is the Mercantile far from here?" "Just 2 blocks down on Montezuma Street. Can't miss it, biggest store in town." Mrs. Palmer lowered her voice conspiratorially. "And between us, Mrs. Henderson is getting on in years. Her eyesight isn't what it was, which means she needs someone with young eyes and nimble fingers." After breakfast, Rebecca helped the children dress in their cleanest clothes, then did her best to make herself presentable. Their wardrobes were sadly limited after the hasty departure from Tucson, but at least everything was clean thanks to Mrs. Palmer's laundry facilities. "Now, I want you both to be on your best behavior while we're out today," Rebecca instructed as she buttoned Emily's dress. "Prescott is our new home and first impressions matter. When will Mr. Ike come?" Emily asked, fidgeting impatiently. "He promised." "I don't know, sweetheart. He has business to attend to." Rebecca smoothed the child's hair. "But I'm sure he'll keep his promise when he can." They set out shortly after 9 o'clock, with Mrs. Palmer's detailed directions to the Mercantile and several other establishments that might be of interest. The streets were busy with morning traffic wagons delivering goods, townspeople going about their business, and the occasional horseback rider navigating between vehicles. Prescott was indeed a more established town than Rebecca had expected, with substantial buildings lining the main streets and a general air of prosperity. The territorial capital dominated one side of the central plaza, its presence lending an air of importance to the surrounding area. The Mercantile was easy to find, just as Mrs. Palmer had said. A large wooden sign proclaimed, "Henderson's General Mercantile, established 1864, above a display window filled with an array of goods from practical necessities to modest luxuries. Inside, the store was a treasure trove of merchandise shelves stacked with canned goods and dry provisions, bolts of fabric in various colors and qualities, tools, housewares, clothing, and a glass case displaying jewelry and other small valuables. An elderly woman with spectacles perched on her nose stood behind the counter, examining a ledger with evident frustration. She looked up at the sound of the bell over the door, squinting slightly. "Good morning," she called. "Welcome to Henderson's." "Just browsing, or can I help you find something specific?" Rebecca approached the counter, the children staying close beside her. "Good morning. Mrs. Palmer at the boarding house suggested I speak with you. I understand you might be in need of a seamstress for alterations." The woman's expression brightened immediately. Did she now? Bless that woman. I've been drowning in mending and alteration since Miss Perkins left to get married last month. She extended a hand across the counter. "I'm Martha Henderson." "Rebecca Vance," Rebecca replied, shaking the offered hand. "And these are my children, Daniel and Emily." If Mrs. Henderson noticed the slight hesitation, she gave no indication. "Pleased to meet you all. You've arrived at just the right time, Miss Vance. I have a stack of work that needs attention, and my eyes aren't what they used to be for fine stitching." "I'd be very grateful for the opportunity," Rebecca said sincerely. "I've worked as a seamstress before in Tucson." Mrs. Henderson nodded approvingly. "Can you start today?" "I have a back room set up with everything you'd need: a good machine, plenty of thread and notions, and natural light from the window." The offer was better than Rebecca had dared hope. "Yes, I can start immediately, but—" She glanced at the children. Understanding dawned in Mrs. Henderson's eyes. "The little ones can stay too, of course. There's plenty of room, and as long as they don't disturb the customers, I've no objection. My own grandchildren visit often enough." Relief washed over Rebecca. Finding work that allowed her to keep the children nearby had been one of her primary concerns. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. We won't disappoint you." "I'm sure you won't." The older woman smiled warmly. "Let me show you the workroom and we can discuss terms." The workroom proved to be a pleasant space at the rear of the store, with a large window overlooking an alley garden and a solid oak table supporting a modern Singer sewing machine. Shelves along one wall held an organized array of thread, buttons, ribbons, and other sewing notions, while a large basket overflowed with garments awaiting attention. Mrs. Henderson offered fair wages, not generous, but enough to cover their room and board with a little left over for savings. More importantly, the position offered stability and respectability, two things Rebecca desperately needed to establish their new life in Prescott. The children settled in a corner of the workroom with some paper and pencils Mrs. Henderson provided, drawing pictures and whispering together, while Rebecca began sorting through the pile of alterations. The work was straightforward, taking in waistbands, hemming trousers. Repairing torn seams, the kind of task she could complete efficiently while still keeping an eye on Daniel and Emily. By midday, Rebecca had made significant progress, earning an approving nod from Mrs. Henderson when she came to check on her new employee. "You have a good hand," the older woman observed, examining a neatly mended shirt. "Quick and precise. I think this arrangement will work out splendidly for us both." They broke for lunch, with Mrs. Henderson insisting on sending her husband's assistant to fetch sandwiches from the cafe across the street. The children ate enthusiastically, their morning in new surroundings having given them healthy appetites. Rebecca was just returning to her sewing machine when the bell above the store's front door jingled. She thought nothing of it until Emily suddenly jumped up from her drawing. "Mr. Ike!" the little girl exclaimed, running toward the doorway that connected the workroom to the store. Rebecca looked up to see Isaac standing there, hat in hand, looking somewhat cleaner and more rested than when they'd parted the previous day. Her heart gave an unexpected leap at the sight of him. "You came." Daniel joined his sister, his usual reserve forgotten in his excitement. "I promised, didn't I?" Isaac smiled at the children, then raised his eyes to meet Rebecca's. "Hope I'm not interrupting your work, Miss Vance." "Not at all." Rebecca set aside the skirt she was hemming and rose to greet him. "Mrs. Henderson has been kind enough to offer me employment." "So I heard." Isaac nodded toward the front of the store. "Mrs. Henderson and I are old acquaintances. She mentioned she'd hired a new seamstress this morning." Before Rebecca could respond, Mrs. Henderson herself appeared in the doorway behind Isaac. "Indeed I did, and a fine one at that. Though you might have mentioned you knew her when you came asking about work for a seamstress yesterday." Rebecca looked between them, confused. "Yesterday? But we only arrived in Prescott yesterday afternoon." Isaac had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I may have made some inquiries while you were getting settled at Mrs. Palmer's. Mr. Lawson has been quite concerned about your welfare," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. "Asked about respectable employment opportunities for a lady with 2 young ones to care for. Not that I'm complaining. Mind you, his timing was providential, given my need." Warmth spread through Rebecca's chest at the realization that Isaac had been working to secure her future, even as he seemed to be saying goodbye. It was a thoughtfulness that went beyond mere kindness to a stranger. "Thank you," she said softly, meeting his gaze directly. "That was very considerate of you. Isaac shifted uncomfortably under her scrutiny. Least I could do. He turned his attention to the children, clearly seeking safer ground. And how are you two settling into Prescott? Exploring your new surroundings. Mrs. Henderson gave us paper to draw on, Emily informed him, tugging at his hand. Come see my picture. It's our new house, except I made it bigger with more rooms. Is that so? Isaac allowed himself to be led to the children's corner, crouching down to examine their artwork with appropriate solemnity. Mrs. Henderson gave Rebecca a meaningful look before returning to the front of the store, leaving her to wonder just how much Isaac had shared about their circumstances. For the next hour, Isaac stayed in the workroom, entertaining the children with stories and small whittling projects while Rebecca continued her sewing. There was a comfortable domesticity to the scene that both soothed and unsettled her. Soothed because it felt so natural, unsettled because she knew it was temporary. Eventually, Isaac rose from his position on the floor. I should let you get back to your work properly, Miss Vance. I just wanted to make sure you were all settling in all right. We are, thanks to your help. Rebecca set aside her sewing again. Will you? That is, are you staying in Prescott long? A shadow crossed his face. Not sure yet. Got some business to attend to that might take a few days. Business related to Bishop. The question slipped out before she could consider its wisdom. Isaac's expression turned guarded. What makes you ask that? Just something in your manner whenever his name comes up. Rebecca lowered her voice, conscious of the children nearby. You've been very helpful to us, Mr. Lawson, but I wouldn't want you putting yourself at risk on our account. Some things are worth the risk, he said quietly. That land your sister left it rightfully belongs to those children, their future inheritance. It's not worth anyone's life, Rebecca insisted. Especially not yours. Something shifted in Isaac's gaze at her words, a softening perhaps, or a recognition. I appreciate your concern, but I'm just making inquiries for now. Nothing dangerous. Rebecca wasn't entirely convinced, but she knew she had no right to question his decisions. Will we see you again before you finish your business? Count on it. Isaac's smile returned as he glanced at the children. Got to make sure these two aren't giving you too much trouble. Emily abandoned her drawing to wrap her arms around Isaac's legs. Come for supper at Mrs. Palmer's. She makes pie on Wednesdays. Today is Wednesday, Isaac laughed, gently disentangling himself. Is that an invitation, Miss Emily? Please come, Daniel added, his expression earnest. We can show you our rooms properly. We were too tired yesterday. Isaac looked to Rebecca, clearly leaving the decision to her. If your aunt doesn't mind, of course. Rebecca found she didn't mind at all. We would be delighted to have you join us for supper, Mr. Lawson. 6 o'clock at Mrs. Palmer's, if that suits you. It suits me just fine. He settled his hat on his head, tipping it slightly. Until this evening, then. The children waved enthusiastically as he departed, then returned to their drawings with renewed vigor, now apparently planning what they would show him when he visited their rooms. Rebecca resumed her sewing, her mind still on Isaac's cryptic comments about Bishop and her sister's land. What exactly was he planning? And why would a man she'd known for only a few days take such an interest in their welfare? The questions lingered as she worked through the afternoon, her fingers moving efficiently while her thoughts remained tangled around the puzzle that was Isaac Lawson. At precisely 6 o'clock, Isaac arrived at Palmer House, freshly shaven and wearing a clean shirt under his usual vest and jacket. He carried a small package wrapped in brown paper, which he presented to Mrs. Palmer as she welcomed him to the dining room. Just a token of appreciation for your hospitality, he said as the older woman unwrapped a packet of imported tea. You spoil me, Mr. Lawson, Mrs. Palmer replied, clearly pleased with the gift. though I'm beginning to think it's not my hospitality that brings you here tonight." Isaac's gaze moved to where Rebecca stood with the children, and something in his expression made Rebecca's cheeks warm unexpectedly. Supper was a pleasant affair, with Mrs. Palmer serving a hearty stew accompanied by fresh bread and, as Emily had promised, pie for dessert. The dining room was shared with 3 other boarders and elderly schoolteacher, a young clerk from the territorial offices, and a widow who gave piano lessons in the parlor during the day. Conversation flowed easily, with Isaac answering questions about conditions in the southern part of the territory, and offering occasional stories that had the children giggling behind their hands. Rebecca observed him throughout the meal, noting how naturally he interacted with everyone at the table while still maintaining a certain reserve. After dessert, Emily insisted on showing Isaac their rooms as promised. Mrs. Palmer smiled indulgently as the little girl tugged the tall cowboy toward the stairs, with Daniel following close behind. "Children know," the older woman remarked cryptically to Rebecca as they gathered the dessert plates. "I beg your pardon, children know good people when they meet them." Mrs. Palmer nodded toward the stairs. "Those little ones have taken to Mr. Lawson like ducks to water. They sense what adults sometimes miss." Rebecca had no ready response to this observation, so she merely thanked her hostess for the meal and followed the others upstairs. She found Isaac seated on the edge of Emily's trundle bed, examining a row of pebbles the child had collected from the garden that afternoon. Daniel was showing him a bird's nest visible from their window, his usual solemnity giving way to boyish excitement. "And Mrs. Palmer says the bird might lay eggs soon," he was explaining. "We can watch them hatch if we're very quiet and don't scare the mother away." "That's a fine discovery," Isaac agreed seriously. "Birds are particular about their homes. If she chose that spot, she must feel safe there." Something about his words resonated with Rebecca, the idea of safety, of choosing a place to build a home and raise a family. Wasn't that exactly what she was trying to do for these children? "Aunt Becky, Mr. Ike says he knows where there's a creek with fish in it," Emily announced. "Can we go see it someday, perhaps, when we're more settled?" Rebecca replied, conscious of making promises they might not be able to keep. "Mr. Lawson may not be in Prescott that long." Isaac looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "Actually, I've been thinking about that. My business here might take longer than I initially thought." "Oh." Rebecca tried to keep her tone neutral despite her curiosity. Before Isaac could elaborate, there was a knock at the door of the main room. Rebecca opened it to find Mrs. Palmer looking apologetic. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a gentleman downstairs asking for Mr. Lawson. Says it's urgent business." Isaac rose immediately, his relaxed demeanor shifting to alertness. "Did he give a name?" "Mr. Thomas Jenkins from the land office." Mrs. Palmer wrinkled her brow. "Said something about papers being ready sooner than expected." Isaac nodded, his expression clearing slightly. "Thank you, Mrs. Palmer, I'll be right down." He turned to the children. "Duty calls, I'm afraid. Thank you for showing me your fine rooms. Will you come back tomorrow?" Emily asked, her lower lip threatening to tremble. "If I can." Isaac glanced at Rebecca. "Though I might be tied up with this business for a day or two." Rebecca followed him to the door, lowering her voice so the children couldn't hear. "This business, it is about Bishop, isn't it?" Isaac hesitated, then nodded once. "Partially, but it's nothing for you to worry about, just some legal matters that need attending to." "Please be careful," Rebecca said, surprising herself with the intensity of her concern. "Bishop is not a man to cross lightly. I appreciate your concern." His voice softened. "But I've dealt with men like him before. I know how to handle myself." With that, he bid her good night and descended the stairs to meet his visitor. Rebecca returned to the children, helping them prepare for bed while her mind worked over the implications of Isaac's mysterious business. 2 days passed with no word from Isaac. Rebecca continued her work at Henderson's Mercantile, establishing a routine that brought a measure of stability to their lives. The children adapted quickly to their new surroundings, making friends with Mrs. Palmer's grandchildren who visited each afternoon. On the 3rd day, as Rebecca was finishing a particularly intricate alteration on a wedding dress, Mrs. Henderson appeared in the workroom doorway. "There's someone here to see you, Miss Vance," she announced, her expression carefully neutral. "A Mr. Bishop from Tucson." Rebecca's blood ran cold. She glanced at the children, who were fortunately absorbed in a game of jacks in their corner and hadn't heard the name. "I see," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Would you mind watching the children for a moment while I speak with him, Mrs.?" Henderson's eyes showed understanding beyond her words. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need. I'll keep them occupied." Rebecca smoothed her skirt with trembling hands and made her way to the front of the store. Randall Bishop stood examining a display of pocket watches, his back to her. Even from behind, she recognized his expensive coat and the confident set of his shoulders. "Mr. Bishop," she said coldly, "this is unexpected." He turned, a smile spreading across his handsome face that never reached his eyes. "Miss Vance, you led me on quite a chase." "I wasn't aware we were playing games." Rebecca kept her distance, grateful for the counter between them. "What brings you to Prescott? Business primarily." Bishop adjusted his cuffs, a gesture she remembered as a habit when he was planning something. "But I was delighted to hear you had settled here. Saves me the trouble of searching further." "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Bishop, and nothing you want." His smile thinned. "I beg to differ. You still possess the deed to your sister's property that would be put to much better use in more capable hands." "The property belongs to my niece and nephew," Rebecca stated firmly. "Their inheritance from their parents. Children have no use for land," Bishop dismissed. "Besides, I'm prepared to be generous. $500 is more than fair for a plot that size, especially considering the complications." Rebecca felt a chill at his tone. "Complications you created. The answer remains no, Mr. Bishop. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to return to." As she turned to leave, Bishop's voice stopped her. "I understand you've made some new friends here. That Cowboy Lawson, for instance. Interesting fellow, quite a history from what I've learned." Rebecca froze, her heart hammering. "Leave Mr. Lawson out of this. He has nothing to do with our disagreement. On the contrary." Bishop moved closer, lowering his voice. "He's made it very much his business. Been asking questions, filing papers with the land office. Most troubling behavior." Fear for Isaac's safety overrode Rebecca's caution. "What have you done, me?" "Nothing. Yet." Bishop's smile returned, colder than before. "But Prescott can be a dangerous place, Miss Vance. Accidents happen, to all sorts of people, even children." The threat, though veiled, was unmistakable. Rebecca felt sick with fear and rage. "Get out," she whispered fiercely. "Get out before I call the marshal. By all means, involve the law." Bishop straightened his already impeccable jacket. "I'm sure they'd be fascinated to learn how you fled Tucson in the night, trespassing on my property in the process. Or perhaps they'd be interested in the questionable circumstances surrounding your guardianship of those children." Rebecca stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about? My sister legally appointed me their guardian." "Did she? With proper witnesses?" "Documentation that would stand up in court." Bishop's expression was triumphant as doubt crossed Rebecca's face. "I thought not. Hasty arrangements made on a deathbed rarely meet legal standards. The implications were devastating. Without legal guardianship, Rebecca had no right to the children or to make decisions about their inheritance. "You're bluffing," she said, with more confidence than she felt. "Am I?" Bishop reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "This is a petition for guardianship of the minor children Daniel and Emily Ross, on the grounds that their current caretaker is unsuitable and without legal standing. All it requires is my signature and filing with the territorial court." Rebecca felt the room sway slightly. "You wouldn't dare." "I would if necessary, but I prefer simpler solutions." He returned the paper to his pocket. $500 for the deed, Miss Vance. Consider it carefully. You have until tomorrow noon to decide." With that, he tipped his hat and exited the store, leaving Rebecca trembling with a mixture of fear, rage, and desperation. Mrs. Henderson appeared at her side, her lined face creased with concern. "Are you all right, dear? You look pale as a ghost." "I'm fine," Rebecca managed, though she felt anything but just an unpleasant reminder of the past. "That man means trouble," Mrs. Henderson said shrewdly. "I could see it in his eyes." Rebecca couldn't disagree. "The children," she said suddenly, remembering, "I should get back to them. They're fine playing with my thread spools now. Take a moment to collect yourself." Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. "And remember, you're not alone here. Prescott looks after its own." The kindness nearly undid Rebecca's composure. She thanked the older woman and retreated to the workroom, where she busied herself organizing spools of thread while her mind raced with possibilities, each more desperate than the last. By closing time, she had formed a tentative plan. She would take the children and leave Prescott tonight, traveling further north, perhaps to Flagstaff or even beyond the territory's borders. It would mean abandoning the stability they'd begun to establish, but Bishop's threats left her little choice. She was so preoccupied with these thoughts that she didn't immediately notice the commotion at the front of the store as she prepared to leave with the children. It was only when Mrs. Henderson called her name that she looked up to see Isaac standing in the doorway, his expression grim. "Mr. Lawson," she said, relief washing over her at the sight of him unharmed. "You're back. Just in time, it seems." His eyes moved to the children, who had run to greet him with their usual enthusiasm. "Mrs. Henderson tells me you had a visitor today." Rebecca nodded, not wanting to discuss Bishop in front of Daniel and Emily. "We can talk about it later." Isaac seemed to understand. He crouched to speak with the children, producing small carved wooden animals from his pocket, a horse for Daniel and a rabbit for Emily. "Why don't you two wait with Mrs. Henderson for a moment while I speak with your aunt?" When the children had moved away, Isaac straightened, his expression serious. "Bishop threatened you, didn't he? How did you know?" "Because I've spent the last 3 days making life difficult for him." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I filed papers with the land office asserting the children's rights to their parents' property, with you as their legal guardian, made it impossible for him to simply take the land without a fight." Rebecca stared at him in amazement. "You did that for us. But why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." Isaac hesitated, then added more softly, "and because I've come to care about what happens to you, all of you." The admission sent a flutter through Rebecca's chest, but she pushed it aside to focus on their immediate predicament. "Bishop has threatened to challenge my guardianship of the children. He claims the arrangement wasn't properly documented." Isaac nodded grimly. "I expected something like that. He's desperate the papers I filed have temporarily blocked his access to the land, and he's running out of legal options. He gave me until noon tomorrow to accept his offer for the deed." Rebecca lowered her voice further. "But I was planning to leave tonight instead, take the children and head north. Running isn't the answer this time." Isaac's voice was gentle but firm. "It would only confirm his accusations about your suitability as a guardian." "Then what do you suggest?" "He threatened the children, Isaac. I can't take that risk. It was the first time she had used his given name, and something flickered in his eyes at the sound of it. I have a counter-proposal. One that would secure your position legally and protect both you and the children from Bishop's threats. What kind of proposal? Isaac took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. Marriage. Rebecca blinked, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. As your husband, I would have legal standing to protect both you and the children. Bishop couldn't challenge your guardianship without also challenging me, and he's not fool enough for that. Isaac spoke matter-of-factly, though a hint of color had risen in his cheeks. It would be a practical arrangement, of course, for the children's protection. Rebecca stared at him, speechless. The suggestion was so unexpected, so unlike anything she had anticipated, that she couldn't immediately form a coherent response. Isaac misinterpreted her silence. I understand it's sudden, but given the circumstances, I thought, yes, Rebecca interrupted, surprising herself as much as him. Yes, I think that would be a sensible solution. Now it was Isaac's turn to look startled. You agree, just like that? For the children's sake, Rebecca clarified, though her racing heart suggested other motivations she wasn't ready to examine. As you said, it's a practical arrangement. Isaac studied her face for a long moment before nodding. Practical, he echoed. I've spoken with the minister at the Presbyterian Church. He can perform the ceremony tonight if you're willing. Tonight, Rebecca's eyes widened. So soon? Bishop won't wait, and neither should we. Isaac's expression softened. Unless you need more time to consider. Rebecca thought of the children, of Bishop's threats, of the past 3 days of uncertainty. Then she thought of Isaac, his kindness to the children, his steady presence, the way he had worked behind the scenes to protect their interests. No, she said firmly. Tonight is fine. The sooner the better for the children's security. Isaac's relief was visible. I'll make the arrangements. 7 o'clock at the church. It won't be elaborate, but it will be legal. That's what matters. What about after? Rebecca asked, suddenly conscious of the practicalities. Our rooms at Mrs. Palmer's aren't suitable for. That is, they're quite small for 4 people. A hint of a smile touched Isaac's mouth. I've thought of that too. I've been renting a house on the edge of town these past few days. It's modest, but there's enough room for all of us. If that's acceptable to you. The thought of sharing a home with Isaac, of becoming his wife in more than name, sent a rush of heat through Rebecca's body. Yes, that would be acceptable. Good. Isaac glanced toward the children, who were watching them curiously from Mrs. Henderson's side. Should we tell them now? Rebecca nodded, her heart suddenly full as she realized how this news would affect Daniel and Emily. Yes, I think we should. They called the children over, and Rebecca knelt to their level, taking a hand of each in her own. Mr. Lawson and I have something important to tell you, she began carefully. We've decided to get married. Tonight, actually. Emily's eyes widened. Married, like a wedding. With a cake and everything, Isaac chuckled. Maybe not everything tonight, Miss Emily, but all the important parts. Does that mean you'll be our uncle? Daniel asked, his expression serious as always. Isaac exchanged a glance with Rebecca before responding. Actually, I was hoping I might be something more than that. If it's all right with you both, I'd like to be, well, like a father to you. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Rebecca held her breath, watching the children's faces as they processed this unexpected development. Emily was the first to respond, flinging herself at Isaac with a cry of delight. Yes, I want you to be our papa. Daniel was more reserved, studying Isaac with a thoughtful expression that seemed too old for his 8 years. Would you teach me to ride a horse properly, and fish, and build things? All of that and more, Isaac promised solemnly. If you'll have me. The boy considered for a moment longer, then nodded decisively. I think that would be good. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at the simple exchange at the way Isaac had offered exactly what the children needed without presumption or false promises. Mrs. Henderson, who had been observing from a discreet distance, stepped forward with a beaming smile. "Well, this calls for celebration, and preparation. A bride needs at least a decent dress and some flowers, even for a hasty wedding." Before Rebecca could protest, the older woman was in motion, calling instructions to her husband to close the store early and send for Mrs. Palmer. "We'll have you looking proper for your wedding, my dear, even if we only have a few hours to manage it." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Mrs. Palmer arrived with a trunk of possibilities, from which they selected a dress of pale blue silk that had belonged to her daughter, married in Denver now, with 3 children of her own, and she'd be delighted to see it used for such a good cause. The dress required minimal alterations, which Rebecca completed herself under Mrs. Henderson's supervision. Emily was given a ribbon for her hair, and Daniel a clean shirt that Mrs. Palmer's grandson had outgrown. Isaac disappeared to make his own preparations, promising to meet them at the church. Throughout the flurry of activity, Rebecca found herself in a state of stunned disbelief. This morning, she had been a single woman facing threats to her family's safety. By tonight, she would be a married woman with a husband to share her burdens. The speed of the transformation was dizzying. Yet beneath the practical considerations that had prompted Isaac's proposal, Rebecca was increasingly aware of deeper emotions. The flutter in her stomach when she thought of him was not merely gratitude or relief. The anticipation she felt as the hour approached was not solely about securing the children's future. Somewhere in their brief, intense acquaintance, Isaac Lawson had become important to her in ways that transcended their arrangement. Whether he felt the same remained to be seen. At precisely 7 o'clock, Rebecca stood at the back of the small Presbyterian church, the children at her side, preparing to walk toward the man who waited for her at the altar. Mrs. Palmer had arranged a small bouquet of wildflowers, and Mrs. Henderson had pinned a borrowed lace collar to the neckline of the blue dress. "Ready, dear," Mrs. Palmer whispered, giving Rebecca's hand an encouraging squeeze. Rebecca nodded, her eyes fixed on Isaac's tall figure at the front of the church. He had traded his usual attire for a proper suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his posture straight and sure as he waited for her. The ceremony itself was brief but dignified, with Reverend Phillips officiating and the Hendersons and Mrs. Palmer serving as witnesses. The children stood beside them, Emily barely containing her excitement while Daniel watched with solemn attention. When Isaac slipped a simple gold band onto Rebecca's finger, "It was my mother's," he explained quietly. The moment felt suddenly, powerfully real. This was no longer just a practical arrangement but a true joining of lives. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Phillips declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Isaac's kiss was gentle and brief, mindful of their audience, but the warmth in his eyes as he drew back promised more when they were alone. "Mrs. Lawson," he murmured, the name sounding right in a way that surprised them both. Their small party shared a modest celebration at a nearby restaurant, with cake for the children and champagne for the adults. Throughout the meal, Rebecca found herself watching Isaac with new eyes. Her husband now, this man she had known less than a week. It was late by the time they reached the house. Isaac had rented a sturdy 2-story structure on a quiet street at the edge of town. The children, exhausted by the day's excitement, fell asleep almost immediately in the room Isaac had prepared for them, with 2 small beds and a chest for their few belongings. When Rebecca emerged from tucking them in, she found Isaac waiting in the parlor, his jacket removed and collar loosened. The sight of him in this domestic setting, in the home they would now share, brought a flush to her cheeks. "They're asleep," she said unnecessarily, hovering in the doorway. Isaac nodded, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "It's been quite a day for them, for all of us." "Yes." Rebecca twisted her new wedding ring, still unfamiliar, on her finger. "Isaac, I want to thank you for what you've done. For the children and for me. It's more than I could have hoped for." He moved closer, his steps measured, as if giving her time to retreat if she wished. "Rebecca, there's something I need to make clear. This marriage, I proposed it for the children's protection, yes, but that wasn't my only reason." Rebecca's heart quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean that, practical considerations aside, I find myself drawn to you more than I expected. More than I thought possible after Charlotte and my daughter." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I'm trying to say, poorly, is that I hope in time this might become more than an arrangement of convenience, if you're willing." The honesty of his admission touched Rebecca deeply. "I think perhaps it already is," she confessed softly. "I've never met anyone like you, Isaac, never felt so safe, yet so alive at the same time." Something kindled in his eyes at her words. He took another step closer, close enough now that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "May I kiss my wife properly?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. Rebecca nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. Isaac's hands cupped her face with exquisite tenderness, as his lips met hers, not the brief, chaste kiss of the ceremony, but a deeper connection that spoke of desire long restrained. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I promise you, Rebecca, I will do everything in my power to be a good husband to you and a good father to those children. Whatever comes, we'll face it together." "Together," Rebecca echoed, the word feeling like a vow more binding than those they had exchanged in the church. "I like the sound of that." The next morning, Rebecca woke in unfamiliar surroundings, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous day came rushing back. She was in Isaac's bed, their bed now, though he himself was no longer beside her. The room was bathed in early morning light, revealing simple but comfortable furnishings. Isaac's few personal possessions were arranged neatly on the dresser: a pocket watch, a small leather-bound book, a polished stone that looked like something a child might treasure. Rebecca rose and dressed quickly in one of her everyday dresses, which Mrs. Palmer had sent over along with the children's things. She found Isaac in the kitchen, already dressed and preparing breakfast. "Good morning," he greeted her with a warm smile. "I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in months," Rebecca admitted, returning his smile. The awkwardness she had feared was surprisingly absent, replaced by a comfortable sense of rightness. The children, still sleeping, they were exhausted after all the excitement. Isaac poured her a cup of coffee. "I thought we might let them rest a while longer. There's something we need to discuss before they wake." Rebecca accepted the cup, noting the serious turn of his expression. "Bishop?" Isaac nodded, gesturing for her to join him at the table. "I received word late last night that he's checking out of the hotel this morning. Apparently, our marriage has convinced him to pursue other opportunities." "Just like that?" Rebecca was skeptical. "He doesn't seem the type to give up easily." "Oh, he's not giving up entirely." Isaac's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "But he's reassessing his strategy. You see, I may have mentioned to a few influential people in town that Bishop has been threatening a respected new citizen of Prescott I, who happens to be related by marriage to Judge Lawson of the Territorial Court." Rebecca stared at him in surprise. "Judge Lawson? Is he a relation of yours?" "My uncle," Isaac confirmed. "Semi-retired now, but still wielding considerable influence. He's actually the one who suggested I file those papers with the land office on your behalf." You never mentioned this before. I prefer to make my own way, not trade on family connections. Isaac shrugged. But in this case, the connection proved useful. Bishop may be bold, but he's not foolish enough to cross a territorial judge. Rebecca absorbed this new information slowly. So the children's inheritance is safe. And Bishop will leave us alone. The land is secure, yes. As for Bishop, Isaac's expression darkened slightly. Let's just say he understands that pursuing this matter further would be unwise. Especially since I've arranged for the deed to be held in trust for the children until they come of age, with both of us as trustees. Even if something were to happen to either of us, he couldn't touch it. Relief washed over Rebecca, followed quickly by a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. You've thought of everything. I try to. Isaac reached across the table to take her hand. I want you to feel secure, Rebecca. You and the children both. We do, she assured him, squeezing his hand. More than I thought possible a week ago. A noise from the hallway announced the children's awakening. Emily appeared first, her hair tousled from sleep, followed by Daniel, who looked more alert but equally rumpled. Good morning. Emily chirped, making a beeline for Isaac. Is this our house now? Do we live here forever? Isaac lifted her onto his lap with practiced ease. Good morning to you too. And yes, this is our house now, all of us together. Daniel approached more cautiously, his eyes moving between Rebecca and Isaac. Are you really our pa now? He asked directly. I am, if you'll have me. Isaac met the boy's gaze with equal seriousness. I can't replace the father you lost, Daniel. No one could. But I promise to care for you and your sister as if you were my own. The boy considered this solemnly before nodding. I think my pa would be okay with that. He always said family was the most important thing. Your pa was a wise man, Isaac said quietly, and I think you take after him. Daniel's expression lightened at the compliment, and he allowed Isaac to ruffle his hair affectionately. As Rebecca watched the three of them together, Isaac with a child on each side, she felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. This unlikely family, formed in crisis and cemented by choice, had become more precious to her than she could have imagined when she fled Tucson less than a week ago. What shall we do today? Emily asked, already bouncing with energy. Can we explore our new house? And the yard, is there a garden? Can I have flowers? Isaac laughed at the barrage of questions. Yes to all of that and more besides. I thought we might ride out to see that creek I mentioned, the one with fish. It's not far and the weather promises to be fine. A picnic. Emily clapped her hands in delight. Can we have a picnic, Aunt Becky? I mean, should I call you something else now? The question caught Rebecca by surprise. She glanced at Isaac, who raised an eyebrow, leaving the decision to her. You can call me whatever feels right to you, Sweet Pea, she said carefully. Aunt Becky is still true. I am your aunt, but if you wanted to call me something else someday, that would be all right too. Emily nodded thoughtfully. I'll think about it, but I still want a picnic. Then a picnic it shall be, Isaac declared, rising to his feet. Daniel, would you help me see to the horses while the ladies prepare the food? A man's got responsibilities in a family. The boy straightened importantly at being included in men's work, following Isaac outside with newfound confidence in his step. Rebecca and Emily set about preparing a simple picnic, the little girl chattering happily about their new home and all the adventures they might have. As they worked, Rebecca felt a contentment that had been absent from her life for longer than she cared to remember. The day unfolded exactly as promised, a leisurely ride to a pretty creek where the children splashed in the shallows while Isaac taught Daniel the basics of fishing. They ate their picnic on a blanket spread beneath a towering pine, the sun filtering through the branches to dapple the ground with patterns of light and shadow. In the lazy afternoon that followed, with Emily napping against Isaac's side and Daniel absorbed in examining an interesting rock formation nearby, Rebecca found herself studying her new husband's profile. The strength in his features, the kindness in his eyes, the way his hand gently stroked Emily's hair as she slept, all of it combined to create a man unlike any she had known before. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked softly, catching her gaze. "That I'm fortunate," Rebecca replied honestly. "That we all are." His smile warmed her from within. "The fortune is mine, Rebecca. I was a man adrift until I found you three. Now I have purpose again, a family to protect and provide for." "Is that all we are, a purpose?" The question was teasing, but with an undercurrent of genuine inquiry. Isaac's expression softened further. "You know it's more than that. Much more." The tenderness in his voice made Rebecca's heart swell. She leaned against his free shoulder, their sides pressing together in comfortable closeness, and felt his arm come around her. They sat that way for some time, watching the play of light on water and listening to the gentle sounds of the wilderness around them. It was, Rebecca thought, a perfect moment, one she would treasure in the years to come. And there were many such moments in those years, as their unlikely family grew and flourished in the high country of Arizona Territory. Isaac proved to be everything he had promised: a devoted husband to Rebecca and a loving father to Daniel and Emily, who eventually came to call her Ma with the same natural ease with which they called him Pa. 2 years after their hasty wedding, Rebecca gave birth to a son they named James, followed 18 months later by a daughter, Sarah. The little house at the edge of town expanded as their family did, with Isaac adding rooms and a proper garden where Emily could grow the flowers she loved. Daniel, true to his serious nature, excelled in school and eventually followed in Judge Lawson's footsteps, studying law and becoming a respected advocate for territorial rights. Emily grew into a vibrant young woman with her mother's kindness and her father's quiet strength, eventually finding love with the son of a local rancher. As for Rebecca and Isaac, the marriage that began as an arrangement of necessity deepened into a bond of profound love and respect. On quiet evenings after the younger children were asleep, they would often sit together on the porch, hands intertwined, and marvel at the journey that had brought them together. "You ever regret it?" Rebecca asked on one such evening, many years into their marriage. Making such a hasty decision that day in Henderson's Mercantile, Isaac's answer was immediate and certain. "Not for a single moment. Best decision I ever made. Even when I burned the biscuits this morning," she teased. "Even then." He pulled her closer against his side. "Though maybe a little less so at breakfast time." Rebecca laughed, settling comfortably into his embrace as they watched the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. The beauty of it reminded her of how far they had come from those desperate days of flight and uncertainty. "We've been blessed," she murmured. "That we have." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "And it all began because you were brave enough to flee with your sister's orphans, and I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time." "Providence," Rebecca suggested. "Providence," Isaac agreed, "and the best kind of luck." They sat together in contented silence as darkness fell, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them as they had faced everything else since that fateful meeting on the trail from Tucson, together, with love and courage, as a family.